Hey all, here are OS reviews. Recently we checked out the Cat S22 Flip as well as the Nokia 2760 Flip, which are both very simple flip phones but can act as an alternative to a smartphone if you're looking for a minimalist kind of detox of sorts just for making calls and doing the basics. And it's pretty good to see this form factor making a resurgence since flip phones were iconic in the early 2000s. And although these examples are more categorized as dumb phones, even though I'm not a huge fan of that term, there are higher-end folding phones these days as well, of course, such as Samsung's Galaxy Z Flip and even the revived Moto Razr is another example, where you have an actual foldable display and becomes much larger when you open it up. Today we're taking a look at another example, which is not in the latter group, but rather still in the kind of basic/dumb phone category. It's called the Iris Easy Flip, and it's from Consumer Cellular. So this can be thought of as an alternative to other kind of prepaid carriers, including Boost Mobile. In fact, Boost Mobile also has the same phone under a slightly different name called the Summit Flip, but they all retail here for $60 and have pretty much identical specs. The device comes in two colors, either a black or a red edition that you can pick between, and it has notably a pretty large external display measuring 2.8 inches diagonally, which is larger compared to some of the other KaiOS-powered flip phones like the aforementioned Nokia that we saw there earlier. So they claim that this will be easier to use for some quick notifications, as well as acting as a viewfinder for taking selfies with the 5-megapixel camera. And technically, this is powered by Android. It's just been heavily customized to give you more restricted functionality and provide a more simple operating system. There is no touchscreen on this particular model, unlike the Cat S22 Flip. You do have built-in Wi-Fi as well as Bluetooth and 4G LTE. It also comes with 8 gigs of storage that can be augmented up to 128 gigabytes with a micro SD card inserted, a 2000 mAh capacity battery, and a standard 3.5mm headphone jack is also included. And last but not least, this shouldn't be confused with the Iris Flip, which is yet another model that came out slightly earlier that is instead powered by KaiOS, similar to the Nokia device here, instead of the Android-based operating system of the Easy Flip that has a larger screen there on the front. So it comes in a packaging that looks like this, with the slogan, "Simple, never felt so smart," and on the inside we have a pretty large pamphlet, since a lot of devices under the Consumer Cellular brand are marketed towards the elderly, for example, for children, pretty well presented with a lot of just info at a glance of how to even charge the device, so on and so forth. And then down below here is where you'll find a standard wall outlet as well as a USB Type-C charging cable. Taking a closer look at the design of the Iris Easy Flip here first, we have that aforementioned 2.8-inch display on the front, which is definitely quite large compared to the majority, again, of other simple flip phones that we have seen in the past. As you can tell, they're side by side. I do wish, though, it would be a touchscreen instead of being just a passive display, however, so you can't really interact with the screen, aside from kind of changing the volume, taking a look at quick kind of incoming calls, as well as using it for a viewfinder with the front-facing camera, and that is pretty much it. If they made it touch-enabled, I feel like it might have been possible to use it even without opening up the phone for simple things like calling, for instance. So I think adding a touch digitizer could be something worth considering maybe in a next generation model. The only other phone, or really a flip phone I would say, that has such a large screen on the front that I can think of would be the Samsung Galaxy W, aka Golden series, that we also reviewed recently as well in a throwback, but these are of course marketed towards a slightly different crowd. They're much more higher end flagship phones into a flip form factor, and the entire thing is constructed out of glass and metal, but there's also a huge delta in price, a few $100s versus just $60 in this particular case. Now, the entire frame here is constructed out of a polycarbonate plastic, but doesn't feel too cheap or flimsy. On the rear, you'll find the loudspeaker, as well as on the right-hand spine, there is the 3.5mm headphone jack. Great to find that, as well as volume rockers. Again, there's still Bluetooth, so you can connect to wireless headphones if you prefer as well. The right-hand spine features a dedicated camera shutter key that you can long hold for a couple of seconds to instantly jump into the camera app, as well as the USB Type-C port for charging. And finally, the back cover here can be fully removed, along with the battery that you can actually replace and swap out, so great for repairability. And below here is where you'll find the micro SD card, as well as the SIM card slots. Now, one other thing I'll point out about the front display is that the clock style as well as the wallpaper can all be customized under advanced settings, although there is a slight gap between the glass as well as the screen underneath, so it can cast a little bit more glare than I would like. Again, maybe something they can reduce the size of that gap in a future gen model. And then once we flip open the phone, we are presented with a, of course, much more spacious keypad down below. And again, that intended demographic being for the elderly or for kids, they'll be able to very easily navigate using the oversized buttons. Everything here, again, is also backlit, so you can see them pretty easily in the dark, and they're pretty responsive and tactile. It also includes an emergency contact key that you can program here to dial someone if you need help, but all of the other letters down below can also be programmed to other speed contacts. The speaker key here allows you to instantly mute or play back sound once again, as well as simple talk and end, and 2 shortcut keys, shoulder keys, for navigating around. The main menu here is in a list format, so very easy to operate. And by the way, the internal screen size is also 1.8 inches. In fact, it's a mirror of the external screen. The display, though, is a TN screen, so keep that in mind. It's not quite as good as an IPS LCD when it comes to viewing angles, so if you are looking at it at some extreme tilts, you will notice that colors will seem to wash out a little bit more, but for just basic purposes of just calling primarily, texting, things like that, it, again, doesn't really get in the way of it being functional enough. Now, you are able to take a look at the wireless connectivity option up top, which, by the way, we can also tap on the shoulder up button in order to jump into the shortcut drawer. Down key here to jump into other shortcuts, including messages. Clicking on the right will take us into contacts that we have saved in the phone, whereas left will go into our gallery view of images that we have saved. So they can be assigned to other special functions, versus an OK will go into the full list of apps, which can also be more easily maneuvered using the number pad down below. For example, 9 will take you into settings, and you're able to jump into here at a click. Which, speaking of, you can tell that the device is definitely quite locked down from a skin or launcher perspective. You're able to check for system updates, and there are still some places where you can technically tell that it's powered by something like Android, including some of the chime sounds as well. But when it comes to app support, you don't have the Google Play Store on here, so unless you are sideloading your own APKs, you're not going to be able to find additional, say, game content. But again, that's not really the main emphasis, I would argue, of this particular model. Final look at some of the advanced settings. You can actually use this with mobile hotspot acting as kind of a Wi-Fi network to other devices. Otherwise, under accessibility, you can actually increase the font size as well as invert the colors, and also connect to other hearing aids as well. So accessibility being a larger selling point on this phone based on the demographic that they're going after here. Under display, you can also change the aforementioned wallpaper. Here's one from Consumer Cellular themselves that's accented in orange. And you can also choose the aforementioned clock style for the front display under number 7 from a disc clock to a digital style clock instead. So now if we flip the phone closed, you'll see that style also change accordingly. We've also set the internal wallpaper to be a little different. And last but not least, you can also choose a grid layout instead. Format that looks something like this, a little bit more conventional compared to other Android as well as iOS flip phones. But again, if you want the list view instead, one benefit is you do have those quick shortcuts of pressing the numbers to jump into them quickly versus having to rely on the D-pad, although you see a little bit more at a simple glance as a result. I will also mention that similar to other iOS flip phones that we've seen previously, there is no camera on the inside. And that means, again, similar to the Nokia 2760 Flip, as well as some of the Alcatel My Flip phones, you can't really use it in this mode for video conferencing. So now jumping into some of the quick applications, starting with the camera, I would say it's still a pretty basic experience as expected on such an entry-level device. That being said, it seems like the camera does not support autofocus, so you may have to step a little bit further back to kind of capture everything in a clear view. And you can capture video at 480p, aka standard res. Very interestingly, there's also a flash mode that you can turn on and off, and what that does is it actually will turn the entire display on the front here white to simulate a LED flash. So as you can tell here, it just turns white, similar to a flashlight on a smartwatch. You can also have digital zoom by tapping on the star as well as the crown keys. So if I long hold on that for a couple of seconds, you can have a digital crop on the image. Of course, it's not as sharp as optical zoom, but it gets the job done if you want to just get a little bit closer and you're holding relatively still. So again, the takeaway is don't expect anything out of this world, but if you have decent lighting and you are holding again quite still, you can still get some okay looking results, surprisingly, out of this 5 megapixel sensor. As you can tell, they're looking decent enough. Now jumping into some of the other apps built on in, you do have a toolbox. In here you do have a sound recorder, so that uses the microphone, and the quality is not shabby either. Here's a quick demo. This is a quick example of what video recording sounds like with the built-in mic. So there we go. It actually is pretty loud and clear, which is also important for such a basic phone catered towards calling like this. The ergonomics, of course, are quite good because the earpiece versus the microphone are positioned quite far apart in the flip mode. The next one here is just a simple music player, so if you have any MP3 WMA tracks loaded on here, you can definitely use this as a music player with some headphones plugged in, or again connecting to wireless headphones. The clock app here also kind of gives away that it is technically running on Android. It looks like a pretty similar skin as some other budget phones we've seen in the past, but you're able to set timers, take a look at world clocks, as well as have a countdown timer here as well. And then we have a basic calculator that does use the D-pad for entering things in. Last but not least, there is the FM radio, which requires headphones plugged in to act as the antenna, and you have to turn off the airplane mode as well, but surprisingly got a pretty good signal and works decently. So you can also find a basic calendar on here, but again, there is no sync capability with something like, say, your Google Calendar appointments, so everything will be kind of local to the app that is running on this particular phone. That being said, the interface is easy to use, and you can still add events, but again, it's just not synchronized to your Google account. So de-Googled in that way, but you can still save it as an event, and then once that approaches, you'll get a notification on the phone. It's also a good moment to take a look at the keypad. So for text entry, you can use a few different formats, including T9 for predictive text. And that means instead of pressing on the keys multiple times to shift between A and C, you just have to tap on the number here once, and it kind of predicts which letter you're pressing on. So typing in hello as a quick example, HELLO, you can tell that it's recognized I'm trying to tap in hello, even though I've just tapped once on these buttons instead of 3 times to shift into those corresponding spots. So that is the predictive text entry, and it's generally accurate enough. Some other recommendations will also show up down below that you can click on instead as an alternative. It still isn't quite as, I think, responsive or easy to use as a regular QWERTY layout that has individual letters, but obviously that's not going to be possible on a flip phone like this with a T9 style keypad. So keep that in mind. For things like texting, you can kind of get used to it, and the predictive software is decent, but I think it's more catered towards voice calling more than anything, but it is what it is. You can also shift into a few other formats, including, for example, symbols as well as letters. So if we tap on this, you'll find down below now a couple of other examples that you can then shift and slide between. What is missing, however, would be emojis, as you can tell here. I think that would be nice to add as another tab, but it is what it is. You can use some of these symbols to act as a makeshift expression. And really, last but not least, it's going to be the browser, which, because it is powered by Android, it's using the same WebKit-based browser that Chrome is also based on. It's actually surprisingly capable for just a flip phone, or what we think of as a dumb phone, but really you get a similar, again, performance as a budget Android phone, and you are taking a look at Google here by default that you can also tap inside to learn a little bit more. Again, you have to rely on the D-pad for navigation as opposed to touch, which maybe would have been more versatile if they gave you a second option, but still it works okay. You can also open up multiple tabs in this browser as well to jump back and forth between them, and under more advanced options, you can add different pages to your bookmark. You can take a look at any downloads such as images, APKs, and verify that it is indeed using the Chrome browser. It's just, again, not optimized for touch here, and also change it to a different home page as well. Sure, you may have to wait for just a couple more seconds because of the more limited CPU in here. It's really a quad-core chip compared to something like octa-core. It's an entry-level MediaTek processor, but still it'll get you by in most cases for just light web browsing, and you can choose the mobile version of Pages for better rendering as well. And again, text details actually load up a little faster than expected. Definitely okay for things like quick news that you're reading, weather information can all be handled. But again, unlike a KaiOS phone, especially some of the KaiOS 2 powered devices, which had more of the Google integration baked in, there isn't going to be, say, Google Assistant on here for voice input, so you still have to text and type things in using the T9 keypad down below. You can, of course, also load up YouTube. In fact, videos will also play back, and here is our channel, for instance. But after a couple of seconds, it will load up, as you can tell there, so you are able to play back YouTube videos on a flip phone over here. Now, there is no built-in accelerometer or motion sensor, so it can't automatically detect and flip over the screen, but you can tap on the full screen video icon here, and subsequently it will jump into a slightly larger view, but again, not everything will be completely optimized for that landscape form factor, unfortunately. But again, that serves as an example. Since it is based on Chrome, you are able to pretty much navigate any site. Reception quality was also generally quite strong when it comes to both Wi-Fi as well as 4G LTE. Didn't really have any dropped calls or disconnections here in the Seattle suburbs, and callers said that I sounded loud and clear, which again is the main point, I would say, of a phone like this at the end of the day. And I'm glad to see that flip phones at least haven't really died. In fact, they're making a bit of a soft revival of sorts, as a lot of these devices are now sharing this type of form factor yet again. And there are definitely some benefits from, again, a design like this when it comes to protecting that internal screen, taking up a little less space when you're sliding into your pocket, as well as just being maybe a little bit more satisfying as you're answering a call and then hanging up just by flipping the phone shut. Provides you with a basic enough experience with some modern hardware when it comes to connectivity at the very least. So you can check out more details if interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. That's been kind of another interesting flip phone here in 2024. That's the Iris Easy Flip.